My name is Chloe Vance. I'm 32 years old, and last spring, I recovered $4.2 million in fraudulent asset transfers for a Dallas-based real estate conglomerate that 3 senior partners had completely missed. That's what I do. I find the numbers people bury. I trace the money people hide. I rebuild the financial truth from the wreckage of lies. And I do it so quietly that most people in a room never even notice I'm there. That invisibility? My family turned it into a character flaw. I remember the exact moment I understood what I was to them. Not a person, not a daughter, or a sister, or even a colleague. I was a utility. Something you plug into the wall when the lights go out, and completely forget about the moment the power comes back on. It was a Tuesday in October, a regular work night, and I was sitting at my kitchen table at 11:47 p.m. with 3 browser tabs open, a forensic audit spreadsheet, a mortgage amortization calculator, and my family's monthly expense tracker, which I maintained because no one else ever bothered to. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago. My shoes were still on. I hadn't eaten dinner. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus Webb, the CFO of a mid-sized commercial property firm. I'd been courting for 8 months, $1 million consulting contract, the kind of client that doesn't come twice. His message was 4 words: we need to talk. That specific combination of words, in that specific order, from a client who had been warm and enthusiastic in every prior communication, is what we in forensic accounting call a pre-termination signal. I've seen it before. Someone found something. Someone said something. And whatever it was, it had already done its damage before I even knew there was a fire. I called him immediately. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he'd been waiting. "Chloe," he said, and there was something careful in his voice. Not angry, worse than angry. Cautious. "I'm going to send you something before we speak further. I need you to watch it first." He sent a link. Snapchat public story. 11 seconds of video. I pressed play. The setting was Olio, a restaurant in downtown Austin where the tasting menu starts at $180 per person, and the wine list has a sommelier dedicated exclusively to it. I recognized the lighting, warm, amber, the kind of soft glow that makes everyone look expensive. There was a table with charcuterie boards and champagne flutes and a birthday flower arrangement. I didn't remember ordering, but somehow, in the back of my mind, recognized the florist's style from a charge on the joint account I'd been quietly maintaining for 3 years. My mother was there. Diana Vance, 58 years old, wearing the cream cashmere wrap I'd bought her for Christmas 18 months ago. She had a champagne flute raised, and she was laughing. That full open laugh she reserves for rooms where she wants everyone to see how comfortable she is. My sister Brooklyn was there too. 27 years old, dark hair, wearing something sequined that I didn't recognize, but probably cost more than my first month's rent in Austin. And then there was Austin, my brother, 36 years old. Standing up from his chair, buttoning his blazer with one hand, raising his glass with the other, looking directly into the camera with the particular confidence of a man who has never once experienced a consequence. "Cheers," he said, in that big, room-filling voice he's had since high school. To Chloe, our pathetic failure of a sister. He said it like a punchline, like the word failure was the funniest thing he'd ever tasted. 32, single and drowning in boring paperwork, while I run the family empire. The table laughed. My mother waved her hand, that specific dismissive wave she uses when she thinks something is beneath commentary, and added, almost as an afterthought, "She should be grateful we give her numbers to crunch, so she feels useful." More laughter. 11 seconds. Then the video ended. I sat there for a moment with my phone face down on the kitchen table, not because I was too hurt to look at it, because I was running the numbers. Marcus Webb came back on the line. "Chloe, I have to be honest with you. My board saw this before I did. You understand that when we're discussing fiduciary oversight, and we're looking at bringing someone into our internal financial infrastructure, we can't have a question mark around professional credibility. That video it's out there. People are tagging it." "I understand," I said. My voice was completely level. It surprised even me. "I'm sorry. I genuinely think you're the best forensic accountant I've met in this city, but I can't move forward right now." He hung up. I sat in my kitchen for exactly 4 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my laptop. 11:53 p.m. to 11:57 p.m. I let myself feel it, the specific, radiating humiliation of having your professional reputation detonated by someone who has never read a balance sheet in his life. Someone who used a word like empire to describe a landscaping operation with 6 trucks and no filed quarterly taxes that I had personally covered twice. Then I opened my encrypted drive. Not to cry, not to draft an angry message, not to call Brooklyn and ask her why she sat there laughing. I opened it because I'm a forensic accountant, and when something is wrong, I don't spiral. I document. Here's what most people in my life don't know about me, and what I've never had a reason to explain until now. I don't process emotions the way most people do. I process them the way I process financial discrepancies. I log them, I categorize them, I build a timeline, and then I figure out exactly what they're worth. That night, sitting in my kitchen with my cold coffee, and my unpaid dinner, and my terminated $1 million contract, I started building a timeline. It went back 5 years. My father, Robert Vance, died in March, 5 years ago this past spring. Pancreatic cancer, 12 weeks from diagnosis to gone. He was 61 years old, and he was the only person in my family who ever looked at me like I was something more than a function. He also left us completely broke. Not modestly struggling. Not tighten the belt for a year broke. I mean the kind of broke where the bank had already initiated foreclosure proceedings on the family home in Tarrytown. The 4-bedroom, $1, $3 million limestone house in one of Austin's most established neighborhoods, before the funeral flowers had even wilted. My mother didn't know how bad it was. My father had been managing it alone, and he'd run out of time to fix it before he ran out of time entirely. Austin didn't know either, which was fine, because Austin's understanding of money has always been limited to what he can spend. Brooklyn was 22 and barely paying attention to anything outside her own orbit. I knew, because I'm the one. Dad called when the numbers stopped adding up. I'm the one who sat with him in his office 2 weeks before he died, going through the files, understanding the full picture. He didn't ask me to fix it. He didn't have the strength to ask for anything by then. But he told me the truth, which, looking back, was the most important thing he ever gave me. So I fixed it. Completely. Without telling anyone. If you've ever been the one in your family who just handled things. No thank you, no acknowledgement. Just the silent expectation that you'd keep handling. Drop a comment. I want to know I'm not the only one. I had been building my own financial infrastructure for 4 years by the time Dad died. I had a private LLC registered in Delaware, Vance Property Holdings, that I'd started as a tax vehicle for my consulting income. It had real assets, real liquidity. And the moment I saw the foreclosure notice in my father's files, I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I contacted the bank directly, not as Chloe Vance, grieving daughter. As the authorized representative of Vance Property Holdings, LLC, submitting a cash acquisition offer on the property at 1402 Tarrytown Ridge Drive, Austin, Texas. The bank accepted within 72 hours. Distressed asset, motivated seller, clean offer. It was a straightforward transaction from their side. From mine, it was the single most deliberate decision I have ever made in my life. I bought the house, my family's house, in my LLC's name, and then I let my family keep living in it without saying a single word. No rent agreement, no conversation, no correction, when my mother told her friends that she was so grateful. Robert had the house paid off before he passed. I sat across from her at the kitchen table and watched her believe something that wasn't true. And I said nothing. I have spent a long time since then asking myself why. The honest answer is, I wanted to keep them safe. My father had asked me, without asking me, to do that. And in the early grief of losing him, when everything felt raw and tilted and wrong, keeping them in that house felt like the last thing I could do for him. The other honest answer is, I thought they would eventually figure it out. I thought Austin, with his big talk about running empires, would someday look at a property record and ask a question. I thought my mother, who has opinions about everything, would eventually wonder whose name the taxes were filed under. They never wondered. They never asked. They just kept living there, and I kept paying prodigy taxes, $2,400 a year, HOA fees, $3,600 a year, utilities, bundled under the LLC account, averaging 890 a month. Austin's landscaping trucks, all 6 of them, plus the commercial equipment trailer, leased under Vance Property Holdings, Because when he started the business 3 years ago, his credit score was 511, and no commercial lender would touch him. He'd asked me to co-sign. I'd done something quieter and more complete. I'd made him the authorized operator of assets I legally owned. He called it his empire. I called it a line item. That night, after Marcus Webb's call ended, and the Snapchat video sat like a bruise on my phone screen, I pulled up the 5-year master ledger I'd been maintaining, the one I'd never shown anyone, never referenced in a family conversation, never used as leverage even once. The total was $387,420. That's what I had paid, directly and indirectly, to maintain the Vance family's life in Austin, Texas, over 5 years, not counting the original acquisition cost of the house, not counting the market appreciation, which had added roughly $340,000 to the property's value since purchase. $387,420. And Austin Vance had just told a room full of people, and posted it publicly, that I was the pathetic failure. I closed the ledger, I opened a new file, and I started planning Thanksgiving. There is a particular kind of silence that exists in forensic accounting. It's not the silence of emptiness. It's the silence of concentration, the specific, pressurized quiet that fills a room. When someone is reading numbers that don't add up and following the trail backward to find out exactly where the lie began. I have sat in that silence for entire weekends. I have eaten meals inside it, forgotten to sleep inside it, lost track of seasons inside it. After Marcus Webb's call, I lived inside that silence for 3 weeks. I didn't call my mother. I didn't text Brooklyn. I didn't send Austin a single message about the video, which by the time I checked, the next morning had been viewed over 400 times and shared into 3 different Austin area Facebook community groups under headlines like Local Businessman Calls Sister Pathetic Failure at Fancy Dinner, and Is this the most brutal family roast or actual cruelty? You decide. I watched the comment sections fill up. I read every word. Then I closed the tabs and went back to work. Because here's what most people do when someone humiliates them publicly. They react. They call. They confront. They send the long message at 2 a.m. that says everything they've been holding for years, and then they wait for an apology that will never come in the form they actually need it. I don't react. I prepare. The first thing I did was call my attorney. Genevieve Park had been my corporate counsel since I registered Vance Property Holdings 5 years ago. She's a compact, meticulous woman in her late 40s who communicates almost entirely in declarative sentences and charges $480 an hour, which I have always considered one of the most efficient expenditures in my budget. I called her on a Wednesday morning, told her I needed a full legal review of the LLC's ownership documentation, the property title status, and all 6 vehicle and equipment leases currently registered under the entity. Are we anticipating a dispute? She asked. We're anticipating a notification, I said. I want everything airtight before I deliver it. She didn't ask more questions. That's another reason I pay her $480 an hour. By Friday, I had a complete legal package sitting in a sealed folder on my desk. The original property deed for 1402 Terrytown Ridge Drive, showing Vance Property Holdings LLC as sole owner of record, the foreclosure rescission documents from 5 years ago, a certified title history, and a formal ledger of all property-related expenditures since acquisition, notarized and formatted for potential legal proceedings. I also had 6 lease termination notices, drafted and ready, for the trucks and equipment trailer. Austin used every single day to build what he called his empire. I put the folder in my fireproof filing cabinet and went back to my regular client work. I wasn't ready yet. Thanksgiving was 6 weeks away. If you've ever had to hold your cards completely still while someone at the table kept raising the stakes, not because you were afraid, but because you were waiting for the exact right moment, you already understand what those 6 weeks felt like. Drop a I know that silence in the comments. The second thing I did was documentation. I am a forensic accountant. Documentation is not a strategy for me. It's a reflex. But over the previous 5 years, my personal records of family financial support had been maintained primarily for tax purposes, not for narrative. I had the numbers. I needed the story they told, so I rebuilt the timeline from scratch. I started with the week my father died. I pulled every bank transfer, every LLC disbursement, every bill payment, every lease filing, and I arranged them in chronological order with corresponding annotations. Not emotional annotations, clinical ones. The kind I would write for a client audit. March 14. Property acquisition. 1402 Tarrytown Ridge Drive. Purchase price. $1,310,000. Funded via Vance Property Holdings LLC operating account. Family notified of resolution. No further details provided. April 2. First property tax installment paid directly from LLC account. $11,200. May 18. Austin Vance requests co-signature on commercial vehicle lease, 3 landscaping trucks. Restructured as LLC asset lease to protect personal credit exposure. Monthly obligation assumed by LLC, $2,340. August 7. Utilities bundle transferred to LLC account at Diana Vance's request to simplify billing. Monthly average, $890. I went line by line, entry by entry. 5 years of entries. The thing about forensic accounting is that numbers, when arranged in sequence, stop being abstract. They become events. They become a story, with a very clear protagonist and a very clear pattern. And the pattern I was reading, sitting at my kitchen table, 3 weeks after a Snapchat video ended a $1 million contract, was almost perfectly clean in its cruelty. Every single month for 5 years, money had moved in one direction, out of my accounts and into my family's life. And every single month for 5 years, the narrative inside that house had moved in one direction too, toward Austin's mythology and away from my existence. I had paid for the table at Olio, where he toasted my failure. I had paid for the trucks he drove to client sites, where he told people he'd built something from nothing. I had paid for the house my mother stood inside, when she told her book club friends that her son was really carrying the family forward. The total, when I finished the annotated timeline and had Genevieve review it for accuracy, was $387, $420 in direct financial support, excluding the property acquisition and excluding $340,000 in accrued equity appreciation, which legally belonged entirely to me. I printed 2 copies, bound them, filed one, kept one on my desk. The third thing I did was watch Austin, not in a surveillance sense, in an accounting sense. I started paying close attention to the public record of what he was doing with the business. The LLC that existed entirely because of the assets I owned, that he had never once acknowledged as anything other than his own creation. He had a business Instagram, Vance Outdoor Solutions, Austin's premier landscaping and property maintenance, 200 followers, regular posts showing the trucks pulling up to client properties, Austin in a branded polo, testimonials from satisfied customers in the hill country suburbs. One post from 3 weeks before the Olio dinner had a caption that made me stop scrolling and read it twice. 5 years ago, I started this with nothing but a truck and a vision. Today, we service 60-plus clients across Travis County. Nobody handed me anything. Everything you see here, I built myself. Entrepreneurship, Aston, Texas, self-made. I screenshotted it. Then I pulled the original lease paperwork for that first truck, the one he'd asked me to help him get 3 years ago, when his credit was a 511 and the dealership had already declined him twice. The lease was filed March 3rd, registered to Vance Property Holdings, LLC, monthly obligation, $780. I added the screenshot to the folder. Brooklyn was easier to document, though in a quieter way. My sister and I have never been close. Not in the way people imagine sisters are supposed to be. We don't fight. We just don't connect. She's always existed in the warm, easy orbit of Austin's version of the family, and I've always existed slightly outside it, which neither of us ever addressed directly. But Brooklyn had a habit that helped me. She posted everything. In the 3 weeks following the Olio dinner, while I sat quietly building my case, Brooklyn posted 41 times across Instagram and TikTok. Restaurant outings. A weekend trip to San Antonio. New boots. A brand I recognized because I'd seen the price point, around $340, tagged with a laughing emoji and the caption, "Treating myself because I deserve it honestly." I didn't document Brooklyn's posts as evidence of wrongdoing. Brooklyn had never asked me for anything directly. But I documented them as context, as the shape of a life that had been quietly subsidized by the stability of a house she didn't know wasn't hers, in a neighborhood she'd always assumed was her family's permanent footing. She was going to have to rebuild that footing on her own. I wanted to know exactly what I was dismantling before I dismantled it. There's a difference between revenge and reclamation. Revenge is emotional. It wants the other person to hurt. Reclamation is structural. It wants the truth to be on record. I stopped wanting revenge somewhere around week 2. What I wanted by week 3 was something much colder and much more permanent. If you know the difference, you know exactly where I was. The fourth thing I did was the hardest. I called my mother, not to confront her, not to give her any warning. I called her on a Sunday afternoon, because she always expects a Sunday call, and not making it would have broken the pattern, and broken the pattern would have told her something was shifting. I'm an accountant. I understand that the most dangerous thing you can do before a controlled disclosure is change your observable behavior. She picked up on the third ring. Chloe. I was just telling Karen about your work, I said. My daughter does something with numbers. Forensic, is it? Karen's son is a surgeon, did I tell you that? Anyway. How are you, honey? I'm good, Mom. Busy. Just wanted to check in. Austin is thinking about expanding. He's been looking at equipment. He mentioned maybe another truck. I told him he should talk to you. You know numbers better than anyone. I said. Thanksgiving is at our place this year. Of course. I'm thinking 30 people, maybe 35. The Hendersons are coming, and I think Aunt Patrice and her crew from San Antonio. Austin wants to do a whole presentation about the business. You know how he gets. I tightened my grip on the phone. That sounds like a great idea, I said. I'll be there. Of course you will. She paused. Oh, and honey, don't bring work things. You always look so stressed. Just come and relax for once. I'll try, I said. After I hung up, I sat very still for a moment. 30 to 35 guests. The Henderson family. Austin's biggest referral clients. Aunt Patrice from San Antonio, who had known my father since college, and who had opinions about everything, and shared them loudly. The extended network of a family that had been performing stability and success in this neighborhood for 5 years on a foundation they didn't know I owned. Austin wanted to do a presentation about the business. I pulled up my laptop and opened the file I'd been building. I started adding slides. There is a specific moment in every forensic audit when the case stops being professional and becomes personal. Not personal in the way that compromises your judgment. Personal in the way that clarifies it. When the numbers stop being abstract entries on a spreadsheet and start being the exact shape of something that was done to you, deliberately, over a long period of time, by people who were counting on you, never adding it up. I've had that moment with clients. I've sat across conference tables from CFOs who went pale when I quietly placed a printed ledger in front of them and said, I found it. I've watched the specific micro-expression that crosses a person's face when they realize the thing they buried has been excavated, cleaned off, and placed under bright light. I had that moment myself, alone in my home office, on a Wednesday evening in early November, exactly 19 days before Thanksgiving. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to receive. The caller was a man named Derek Okafor. He was a commercial property manager in the Cedar Park suburb of Austin, and he had gotten my number from a mutual colleague who'd recommended me for a small forensic review job. He was pleasant on the phone, professional, efficient. We spoke for about 12 minutes about the scope of the project. Then, right before he hung up, he said something that he clearly considered a throwaway pleasantry. Small world, actually. I had a meeting last week with an Austin Vance. Landscaping guy wanted to pitch a maintenance contract for 2 of my properties, sharp dresser. He told me his family has deep roots in the Terrytown area. Been there for decades, old money. My hand went still on my pen. He mentioned his family property, said it's been in the Vance name for years. Used it as a character reference, basically. Said his roots in Austin go back to his father's generation. Interesting, I said. My voice was completely flat. Anyway, I'll send over the project files tomorrow. Looking forward to working with you. He hung up. I put the phone down on my desk and I sat there. Old money. Been in the Vance name for years. His father's generation. Austin Vance had used a house that I purchased, in my LLC's name, with my money, to represent himself as a man of generational wealth to a potential business client. He hadn't just been careless with the truth. He had weaponized my silence. He had taken the invisible infrastructure I'd built and worn it like a costume in front of strangers. Like a medal he'd earned. Like evidence of a legacy he had personally preserved. I opened the master ledger. I didn't look at the totals this time. I looked at the dates. 5 years, 3 months, and 11 days since I had bought that house. I need to pause here and ask you something directly. Have you ever done something significant for someone? Something that required real sacrifice, real resources, real pieces of your own life, and had that person not only fail to acknowledge it, but actively use it to make themselves look better to other people? Because that is a very specific kind of violation. It doesn't make you angry the way insults make you angry. It makes you cold. Drop a comment if you've been there. I went for a walk that night. I do this when I need to think without a screen in front of me. A deliberate, methodical walk through my neighborhood with no podcasts, no phone calls, just the sound of my own footsteps and whatever my mind decides to do with the open space. My neighborhood is quiet in November. The live oaks hold their leaves longer than the other trees, and at night the streetlights catch them in a particular way that makes everything look like it's been lacquered. I walked for 40 minutes. I thought about my father. Robert Vance had been, in most measurable ways, a gentle and impractical man. He loved books about history, cooked exactly 3 dishes reliably, and had a habit of believing the best version of every person he encountered for far longer than the evidence supported. He believed in Austin, long after Austin had given him ample reason not to. He believed my mother's social ambitions were just enthusiasm. He believed the money problems were temporary, manageable, the kind of thing that resolves itself if you stay optimistic and keep working. They didn't resolve, they compounded. And when the cancer came and the time collapsed to weeks, the weight of everything unresolved fell straight down and landed on me, because I was the one who could see it clearly and the one my father trusted to handle what he couldn't. I had honored that. For 5 years, I had honored it completely. Walking under the lacquered November oaks, I asked myself for the first time whether my father would have wanted me to. The answer I came back with surprised me. No, not like this. Not with my name disappearing from every narrative while Austin performed Legacy, and my mother curated a family story that had me somewhere in the background, crunching numbers so she felt useful. My father had trusted me with the truth, because he respected me. He would not have recognized what I had allowed to grow from that trust. The silent subsidizing of people who publicly called me a failure while privately depending on everything I built. I walked home. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table, and I stopped being the person who was waiting for acknowledgement. There is a concept in forensic accounting called material misrepresentation. It refers to a false statement or a deliberate omission that is significant enough to change how a reasonable person would evaluate a situation. It's the difference between a rounding error and a fraud. The number doesn't have to be large. The misrepresentation just has to matter. My family had been operating under a material misrepresentation for 5 years. They believed they owned their home. They believed Austin had built something from nothing. They believed I was peripheral. Useful in a minor, administrative way, but fundamentally irrelevant to the architecture of their lives. Every single one of those beliefs was false, and I had, through my silence, allowed all 3 of them to calcify into the kind of certainty that people don't question because it's never been challenged. That ends, I thought, on Thanksgiving. I spent the following week doing something I had never done before in 5 years of quietly managing the Vance family's financial life. I calculated what I was owed, not emotionally, financially. I pulled comparable rental rates for the Terrytown neighborhood, a house of that size, that location, that condition, and I ran them backward across 63 months. The fair market rental value, conservatively estimated using 3 independent property management sources and current Austin real estate data, came to between $6,800 and $7,400 per month. I used the conservative number, 63 months at $6,008. I typed the formula into my spreadsheet and hit enter. $428,400. That was the value of the rent my family had never paid me, not the mortgage I'd covered, not the taxes or the HOA or the utilities, just the rent, just the baseline fair market value of living in a house they didn't own, in a neighborhood they couldn't have afforded. For 5 years and 3 months, I added it to the master ledger as a separate line item labeled accrued rental value, 1402 Tarrytown Ridge Drive, unpaid. Out to Vance Property Holdings LLC. Then I pulled Austin's lease documents. The 6 trucks and the equipment trailer had a combined monthly lease obligation of $6,240. Over 38 months, the duration of the business. The total liability assumed by my LLC on his behalf was $237,120. I added that line too. The complete picture, when I finished building it, looked like this. Property acquisition and maintenance over 63 months. $387,420. Accrued fair market rental value unpaid. $428,400. Commercial vehicle and equipment leases assumed on Austin's behalf. $237,120. Current market equity in the property. $340,000 accrued entirely to LLC. Total financial reality of the Vance family's life. $1,392,940. $1,392,940. That was the number underneath the life they were performing. That was the foundation they'd been standing on without knowing who poured it. I looked at that number for a long time. Then I labeled the document. Thanksgiving presentation. Final draft. Here's what nobody tells you about being the financially capable person in a family that doesn't respect you. The capability itself becomes the trap. Because you can fix things, you do. Because you do, they expect it. Because they expect it, they stop seeing it. And because they stop seeing it, they start genuinely believing the fiction. That things were always fine. That someone else deserves the credit. That you are somehow the least consequential person in a dynamic you are entirely funding. I don't know if that's specific to American families or just human nature, but I know it's a pattern, and I know the only way to break a pattern is to introduce a variable that the system cannot absorb. I was about to become that variable. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I drove to Tarrytown. I parked 1 block from the house, not in front of it, because I didn't want to trigger a conversation I wasn't ready to have yet, and I sat in my car and looked at it through the windshield. 1402 Tarrytown Ridge Drive. Limestone exterior, mature live oaks in the front yard. The flagstone path my mother had always been proud of. The porch light Austin had replaced last spring with something more modern that I'd noticed charged to the utility account 3 weeks later. Every inch of it mine. A light was on in the kitchen. I could see the silhouette of someone moving. Probably my mother. Probably dinner preparation. Probably the beginning of some extended planning conversation about Thanksgiving seating charts and who was bringing which dish, and whether Austin's girlfriend was coming, and had anyone heard from Aunt Patrice yet. Normal domestic. Warm in the way lit windows always look warm from the outside. I thought about what that house had cost me, not just in money, in years, in the specific weight of knowing something enormous that you can't say, in the Sunday phone calls where I listened to my mother talk about Austin's vision. While I was actively paying for the trucks, that vision rode on. In the professional credibility I'd lost when a man I respected forwarded me an 11-second video of my brother calling me a failure in a restaurant I had paid for. I didn't feel angry sitting outside that house. I felt clear. Clarity, in my experience, is more dangerous than anger. Anger burns fast and leaves evidence. Clarity is cold and patient and extremely precise. Clarity is what a forensic accountant feels when they have finished building the case and they know, with absolute certainty, that every number is correct and every document is in order, and the only thing left is the delivery. I drove home. I had 14 days. The week before Thanksgiving, 2 things happened. The first, Austin posted again on Instagram, a photo of the fleet. All 6 trucks lined up in a parking lot at golden hour, branded magnetics on every door. Austin standing in front of them, with his arms crossed, and the particular expression of a man who believes completely in the image he is projecting. The caption read, "Built different. Built to last. Vance Outdoor Solutions isn't just a business, it's a legacy." I saved the post to my documentation folder. The second thing. My mother called to confirm my Thanksgiving attendance and mentioned, almost as a footnote, that Austin had invited the Henderson family, his largest client, the family responsible for roughly 30% of his annual revenue, to the dinner. He wanted to, she said, show them the family side of the operation. 32 people confirmed, she said happily, maybe a few more. It's going to be beautiful. It will be, I said. I hung up and opened my laptop. I had a presentation to finalize. Thanksgiving morning arrived the way important days always do, quietly without announcement, looking exactly like any other morning until it doesn't. I woke at 5:47 a.m. without an alarm. I showered, dressed in a charcoal wool blazer and dark trousers, professional, not festive, deliberately so, and sat at my kitchen table with a black coffee and my laptop for exactly 1 hour. I reviewed the presentation one final time, every slide, every number, every document scan. I checked the formatting on the rental ledger, verified the timestamp on the foreclosure rescission paperwork, confirmed that the LLC ownership certificate was crisp and legible at full projection size. Then I closed the laptop, finished my coffee, and drove to Tarrytown. The house looked the way it always looked for large gatherings. My mother's version of beautiful, which meant excessive and carefully considered in equal measure. There were autumn wreaths on both front doors, amber string lights threaded through the live oaks, and the flagstone path had been swept and lined with small lanterns. 3 cars were already in the driveway when I arrived at 11:15 a.m. I recognized the Hendersons' black Suburban. Austin's trucks were parked along the side of the house, all 6 of them, clean, branded, gleaming in the November light like a deliberate display. I looked at them for a moment. Then I carried my bag inside. The kitchen smelled like sage and brown butter, and the specific warm pressure of too many people. In a house that was technically large enough, but always felt smaller when the whole family was in it. My mother was at the stove. Brooklyn was arranging something on a serving tray, wearing a dark red dress and the boots I'd clocked on her Instagram 3 weeks earlier. 2 of Austin's college friends were in the living room, the Henderson family. Gerald and Susan, and their adult son Marcus, were already seated in the formal dining area with glasses of something sparkling. Austin was holding court near the fireplace. He was wearing a blazer I didn't recognize, something dark navy, fitted well. He was mid-story when I walked in. I caught the tail end of it. Something about a contract in the domain area, a difficult client, how he'd handled it. And Gerald Henderson was nodding with the particular attention of a man who considers himself a judge of character and has provisionally approved of what he's seeing. Austin glanced at me when I entered. Chloe, a chin lift, casual, the greeting you give someone you've categorized as furniture. Austin, I said. My mother turned from the stove and opened her arms. Honey, come, you look thin. Are you eating? I'm eating, I said. I hugged her. Over her shoulder, I could see the living room. The large mounted smart TV screen on the far wall, currently displaying a rotating family photo screensaver. The HDMI input port was on the left side of the panel, exactly where I remembered it. I had a USB drive in my blazer pocket. I went to help Brooklyn with the tray and said nothing else for 2 hours. I want you to understand something about those 2 hours. I have sat in high-stakes client meetings where the entire financial future of a company was about to be restructured. I have delivered findings to boards of directors that resulted in immediate terminations and federal referrals. I have been the person in the room who knows the thing that is about to change everything, while everyone else is still making small talk and refilling their coffee. Nothing I have ever done professionally compares to sitting at that Thanksgiving table for 2 hours, eating my mother's food, listening to Austin perform for the Hendersons, watching Brooklyn laugh at his jokes, while a USB drive sat in my pocket containing 5 years of documented truth. If you've ever had to hold something enormous completely, still inside yourself, while the world moved normally around you, you know exactly what those 2 hours felt like. Dinner was served at 2 o'clock. 31 people at 2 long tables pushed together in the dining room and spilling into the adjoining living area. My mother at one end, Austin positioned at the other, naturally, gravitationally, the way he always arranged himself at the center of any room he entered. Gerald Henderson to his left. I was seated midway down the table, between Aunt Patrice, who smelled like gardenia perfume, and immediately began telling me about her knee surgery, and a neighbor couple I recognized, but had never learned the names of. The food was good. The conversation was loud. Austin was in full performance. Stories about the business, the growth trajectory, the plans for next year. I heard him use the word legacy twice before the main course was finished. Gerald Henderson said, "You've built something real here, Austin. Your father would be proud." The table went warm and agreeable around that statement. I put down my fork. I picked up my water glass, took one sip, and set it down very carefully. Then Austin stood up. He didn't have a microphone, but he didn't need one. His voice has always been the kind that fills rooms without effort, a quality he inherited from my father and deployed with none of my father's warmth. "I just want to take a moment," he said, buttoning his blazer with one hand, "to say how grateful I am. For this house, for this family, for everything we've built together." He raised his glass toward Gerald Henderson, "and for the people who believe in what we're doing." Glasses lifted around the table. He turned his gaze down the table toward me, and I saw it. The flicker of it. The same instinct that had produced that Snapchat video, the reflexive need to establish the hierarchy in front of an audience. Even Chloe made it out of her spreadsheets for one night. Laughter, soft scattered. A few people who didn't know better smiled politely. Maybe next year she'll bring a boyfriend instead of a laptop bag. More laughter. My mother shook her head with a smile. "Austin, I'm joking. Chloe knows I'm joking. She's our family's little number cruncher. We love her for it." The table settled. People picked their forks back up. I stood. It didn't happen dramatically. I didn't push my chair back loudly or raise my voice. I simply stood, the way I stand up in client presentations, with the particular stillness of someone who knows exactly what comes next and has no anxiety about it whatsoever. "Actually," I said, "since we're doing speeches, I have a short presentation I'd like to share." Austin smiled. Generous, indulgent, the smile of a man who thinks he's watching someone try to be interesting. "Sure, Chloe, floor's yours." I walked to the smart TV on the living room wall. 14 people at the main table had direct sightlines. The rest shifted in their chairs. My mother turned from her end of the table with an expression I didn't look at directly because I knew, if I looked at it, I would feel something I couldn't afford to feel yet. I inserted the USB drive. The family photo screensaver disappeared. The first slide filled the screen. Vance Property Holdings, LLC asset disclosure and financial prepared by Chloe M. Vance, Principal, Certified Forensic Accountant. Date: November Thanksgiving, 2024. The room didn't react immediately. People read slowly when they're surprised. Their eyes move across text, and their brains lag behind, waiting for context that explains why what they're seeing can't mean what it appears to mean. Austin's smile held for approximately 4 seconds. Then it didn't. I advanced to the next slide. The property deed for 1402 Tarrytown Ridge Drive, Vance Property Holdings, LLC, sole owner of record. Purchase date. Purchase price. My signature on the acquisition documents, notarized and timestamped 5 weeks after my father's funeral. "What?" My mother's voice. Very quiet. I advanced again. The foreclosure notice from 5 years ago. The bank's formal initiation of auction proceedings on the family home. The document my father had kept in his desk drawer and shown me 2 weeks before he died. The one that confirmed what I'd already suspected. That without intervention, this house would have been sold at auction inside 60 days of his passing. Chloe. Austin's voice had changed. The room-filling confidence was gone. What replaced it was something thinner and more careful. "What is this?" "It's a presentation," I said. "You said the floor was mine." I advanced to the financial ledger slides. 5 years of property taxes, HOA fees, utility payments, maintenance costs, each line itemized, dated, and sourced to LLC disbursement records. Then the truck leases. All 6 registered under the LLC, monthly obligations listed, cumulative total across 38 months displayed in a clean summary box at the bottom of the slide. $237,120. Gerald Henderson leaned forward in his chair. His wife Susan had gone very still. Aunt Patrice, to my left, had stopped mid-sentence about her knee and was reading the screen with her glasses pushed up her nose. I advanced to the final summary slide, the complete number, every category, every line. The total financial architecture of the life this family had been living, displayed in the same clean, professional format I use for million-dollar client audits, $1,392,940. This is the financial foundation of the Vance family's life in Austin for the past 5 years, I said. My voice was the voice I use in boardrooms, measured, precise, without performance. Every number on this screen is documented, notarized, and legally verified. The house you are sitting in is owned by my LLC. The trucks outside belong to my LLC. And as of today, I am formally exercising my rights as sole legal owner of this property and principal of all associated lease agreements. I reached into my blazer pocket. I placed 3 envelopes on the table, one in front of Austin, one set near my mother's end, one for Brooklyn. Those are formal notices. 30 days to vacate the premises. Austin, your lease termination documentation is included. The trucks will be repossessed by the leasing agent on December 26th. Everything is outlined clearly. Genevieve Park, my attorney, is available for questions. I pulled the USB drive from the TV. The screen went dark. The family photo screensaver came back on. All of us at some birthday, years ago, my father in the center laughing. I looked at it for 1 second. Then I picked up my bag from beside the TV stand. The bag my mother had teased me for bringing, and I walked toward the front door. Austin found his voice somewhere near the kitchen doorway. You can't do this. His voice was different from any version I'd heard before, stripped of the performance, lower, cracked at the edges. This is our family's house. Dad's house. You can't just, I can, I said. I have the documentation that confirms I can. Genevieve's number is in the envelope. Chloe, my mother. I stopped walking but didn't turn around immediately. When I did, her face was the face of someone trying to locate solid ground and finding none. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you ever say? Because I wanted to protect you, I said. I did it because Dad asked me to without asking me. And I honored that for 5 years. I looked at her directly. But I am not the family ATM, and I am not a line item, and I am not a number cruncher you tolerate at the table, while Austin gives speeches about legacy in a house that has my name on the deed. I held her gaze for a moment, then I opened the front door and walked out into the November afternoon. The live oaks were holding their leaves still, the way they always do. The lanterns on the flagstone path were lit, amber, and warm. Austin's trucks were lined up along the side of the house, gleaming and branded and, for exactly 30 more days, legally operable. I walked to my car. I put my bag in the passenger seat. I sat there for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, and I felt, underneath the cold precision of everything I'd just done, something that took me a moment to name. Relief, not satisfaction, not triumph. Relief, the specific, physical lightness of a weight that has been set down after so long that you'd stopped noticing you were carrying it. Here is what I know now that I didn't fully understand 5 years ago, when I signed those acquisition documents and chose silence over truth. In America, we are raised to believe that loving your family means absorbing their cost, financially, emotionally, professionally, indefinitely. We are told that the person who sacrifices quietly is the good one, the loyal one, the one who holds things together. And for a while, that framing holds, it feels like virtue. But there is a specific point, and you'll know it when you reach it, where absorbing someone else's cost stops being generosity and becomes something else entirely. It becomes the infrastructure of their delusion. It becomes the foundation they stand on when they call you a failure. It becomes the truck they drive when they tell strangers they built everything themselves. Chloe didn't ruin her family that Thanksgiving. She stopped lying to them. She handed them the truth they had been protected from for 5 years and trusted them, finally, to be adults who could handle it. The most important financial decision she ever made wasn't buying that house. It was deciding, 5 years later, that she was worth more than the silence she'd been keeping. If this story made you think about someone in your life, a situation where you've been the invisible foundation, subscribe to Shadow Drama Stories. Leave a comment below. Tell us your chapter. Because every week we bring you stories about the people who did the quiet work, held the impossible weight, and finally, put it down. You're not alone in this, and neither was Chloe.